Autism touches the lives of many families and classrooms, but understanding how to support children on the spectrum can sometimes feel overwhelming. Parents may wonder what early signs to look for, while educators want to know how to create environments where every child can thrive. In today's episode, we're talking about autism across the places children live, learn, and grow, at home, in early learning settings, and in our communities. Joining us is Michelle McDaniel, Director of USA Regional Autism Network, who works with families and professionals across Alabama to connect them with information, resources, and practical strategies that make a real difference for children on the spectrum. Whether you're a parent seeking guidance or an educator supporting young learners, this conversation is about building understanding, strengthening partnerships, and making sure families know they don't have to navigate this journey alone. Let's get into the conversation. Okay, good morning. We are here talking about autism across contexts and how that shows up in all the places that children live, in early childhood classrooms, at home, and in our communities. I'm joined this morning by Michelle McDaniel, Director of USA Regional Autism Network.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. And I'm also joined by one of my favorite Greg's colleagues. We're not supposed to have favorites, but if you're a regular listener, you already know Miss Paula Reese is here with us.
Good morning.
And she's going to share her experience of being the parent of an autistic child. And so we're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
We're having training here this morning, and she took time away from that to jump in. She's flexible like that.
Right. An important work, important discussion. With an important person, Michelle.
Yes. So let's start with you, Michelle. Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm the director of the Regional Autism Network at University of South Alabama currently. But I actually got my start, we were just talking, back in the late 90s, it's been around a while, in early intervention. So early childhood, early intervention has been my background for a long time. I worked as in several nonprofits, but worked in early childhood in childcare. Specifically for children with disabilities and supporting their families. So this is a really close to home type of topic, and it feels a little bit like getting back to my roots,
Yeah. Well, we're glad you're here. Let's start out with telling our listeners who may not be familiar with the Regional Autism Network. What is it you guys do? Where are you located at? All of that good stuff.
So I'm located at and housed at the University of South Alabama, and the Regional Autism Network is actually statewide. Mm-hmm. So there are actually 5 regional autism networks across the state. Each one is housed at a university, and that was done deliberately so that we are really bridging the gap between that university knowledge and the community. But here in what we call Region 3 or the South Alabama area, I'm in basically my region contains 10 counties in Southwest Alabama. So all the way up
to
I was expecting you to say 2 or 3.
No, all the way up to Dallas, Perry County.
Wow.
So we really try to get into all of those places, and some of our rural areas are really underserved. So trying to make sure they know how to connect with resources. So our charge is basically 4 parts. We have, first of all, direct assistance that we provide. So that looks like someone calls us for information, and it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be a parent of a young child. It could be an adult with autism. It can be a professional that's needing technical support or assistance. And we're just connecting them with information, resources. Also, we do a technical assistance part where we're working with professionals. We get a lot of calls from, say, social workers or sometimes other service providers in the community trying to help someone they're working with in their caseload. And so making sure they understand, what resources are out there, getting them connected to resources. If they have questions they'd like to have answered, we provide community education. That's a big part of what we do. So we do a lot of workshops. We do resource fairs. We even have a quarterly resource fair that we do here in Mobile at the Strata Center. Yep. And then I think you guys have been a part of that a few times. We also have, even in between those quarterly resource fairs, we have a RAN table. We call it RAN, Regional Autism Network. But we have a table that we set up in that lobby just so that folks can come at the last Tuesday of every month. We're going to be there regardless to answer questions, connect people with resources. resources. And then we do professional training. So for professionals, we've done training for educators. We work with SARIC with public school educators once a year, doing some summer training. We've also done some training with counselors and speech therapists, physicians, you name it. And typically those will collaborate with all 5 regions to make that a statewide type of offering. So those are kind of the 4 parts of everything all in all and everything we do. But there's a lot that happens in between each one.
That's a lot. Like even just listening to you, it sounds very familiar because when people, working here at Greg's, when people are like, well, tell us what you do. You're like,
where do we start?
Okay. Settle in because this is going to be a while. That's a lot. So, Paula, I want to ask you from your perspective and this journey that you've been on as a parent, how many different systems have you interacted with? Like, what are the different systems and resources that you have been able to take advantage of?
Wow. From the early intervention piece, like Michelle, we talked about earlier, my son will be 31 in May. So starting out, my source was being a teacher. I started with our speech teacher, Miss Michelle McDaniel, at Council, because I knew there was something. But as a mama and then as a teacher, of course, and my son had the best pediatrician, but at that point in time, his thoughts were boys are slow. Mama, you're a teacher, your expectations, blah, blah, blah.
Really?
But yeah. And when we did the evaluation and screening, he came back and he apologized because it was so new then. You think about where we are now. And then just the hesitancy, and even from my standpoint. But those early intervention teachers from SPED Preschool, Lou Shambo, Monique Gray, Ashley Barnett.
You just over here name dropping.
I am, and they are retired. I think Lou may still do some work.
She does.
But when I tell you, they took me and they said, this is what you are going to do. Because I didn't know what to do. And then part of me being in denial, well, maybe he is slow.
Yeah.
Maybe it's. So the resources in the beginning, and I had to, even though I was a teacher, I had to put my trust, I don't have a SPED background. And so even though I'm early childhood, I had to put my trust in other individuals, and they in turn start out, call this person, let's see what's going on. And I want to say, was there another name maybe for Regional Autism? It was something, but it was also new, going to workshops, listening to individuals. And some of the parent support groups for me were just doomed. And I couldn't get on that end because I wanted to know, but I needed hope.
Yeah.
And so it was, just those individuals that had that background, and they had to say to me this again, because I'm trying to be my own person, and they had to tell me, move out the way. Move out the way. My resources, and some people have a different opinion of public school, but my resources started. And once his pediatrician was on board, they were there. But my resources started with EI and those public school individuals in SPED Preschool. That was, and just asking questions and reading. But you had to be careful with what you read, because the only thing I knew about autism was this old movie where the little boy rocked back and forth. And it scared the bejesus out of me, y'all.
I bet.
Because that was the only thing I knew.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that. My mother and I were disconnected when I was younger. My parents divorced when I was 2. But later in my adult life, she got into another relationship and had another child. And I had moved back home and was starting to work here and kind of immersing in this world of early childhood. Had just had my own child, so I was a new mom, very interested. And I saw some of those signs in my half brother. He was nonverbal when, by the time I met him, she lived in rural Alabama and Georgiana. And so he was about 3 by the time I met him. And he had I could see some of those signs. The rocking back and forth, the self-soothing was one of them, and he was nonverbal, and he was not potty trained, and
right,
so as I was still 19, I was still a child. I, as the child, noticed those things, but only because I was exposed to them here. I wouldn't have known. And she was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I think you need to have him tested, and have some assessments done." And so they did that, and he was, diagnosed autistic, but he grew up going to, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the school here in Mobile, but they lived out in the middle of rural Mobile County, and that bus would go get him every day. He was able to stay in that school program. My mom had addiction issues and things, but that was his consistency. He was able to maintain, even in the summer times. He went to summer programs and stuff like that before he aged out. But he's about 30 now, so I know what you mean.
Right. But that's what I knew. But for my son, he could sing. The communication was not there. He would not say, "Mama," those words. And for me, I'm looking for words. I'm looking for milestones.
Yeah.
He was making all the milestones with the exception of the language. He gave you eye contact. And contrary to when we think about characteristics of autism, he was loving. So I was so confused.
He's very loving now.
So confused he is. And UCP was another resource because at that time that was one of those places. And Miss Sarah and Carrie Drew, again, these were individuals who my little tribe said, "This is what you need to do." And then first we had to put him in daycare a few days a week. So he went with, my sister with daycare because my parents kept all their grandkids. And that was hard for them because, they were reading, they were doing this, and we had to do things differently with him. But my resources, and with it being so new, even from a State Department level, there was just not a lot. And by the time the Autism Network and the resources and the individuals who were trained, a lot of people were going to Birmingham to get trained, and it was scary. We have our moments now, just not knowing, but having individuals and knowing you can go on the website, from the Autism Network, but going to those cluster meetings and just getting information. And my son had teachers who would say, "Come and go with me." And they would tell us as parents, and we all still have a little network,
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about autism itself, and because parents and educators listening, one of the first questions is often, what should I be looking for? So I want to talk a little bit about early signs. And Paula, you asked a really good question earlier before we started recording about neurodivergency and autism and how those link up. So,
I guess, Michelle, because autism has been, and I know especially in education, we have buzzwords. So with neurodivergent, I'm kind of, and I know it encompasses, that umbrella is even greater than with autism.
Sure.
Because autism, we go from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I don't want to negate neurodivergent, but I get kind of confused as to the support, the different groups, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up because I think a lot of people probably experience the same thing. It's what is the term? What are the terms that we use? Because if you even look at just within the spectrum of autism, one, we know that's a huge spectrum. It looks very different from for every single person that has a diagnosis, but also what type of support is needed when you're looking at neurodivergence. Okay, that's an even, like you said, an even broader range. And really what you're looking at is what supports does that person need? How are they perceiving the world? What is it that is causing that neurodivergence there? Is it autism or is it something else? Because that could include something like ADHD or some other things too. So that is going to look different. And I think it gets confusing because, like I said, when you talk to autistic adults, there are some, they want to be called autistic. When you talk to, families of young children, they may not like that identity first kind of term. They may prefer that people first term of a child with autism because they look at the child first, and that's how that's what I grew up into as far as
that's what my son's teachers would say. He has autism. He's not autistic, and there are individuals who don't understand that.
So usually it depends on the population that you're talking with and what they prefer. So I try to defer to, especially if it's an adult, how do you see this? Because not every adult with autism wants to be labeled as autistic or that be their first identifying term. And you have to respect that too. So it really varies depending on what the need is. But I think for the neurodivergence question, that's really more of just understanding that we all learn differently.
Yes.
And we're all experiencing and perceiving the world around us differently, which means we need different supports and just really being respectful of that, whatever that is. And so if there's someone who can articulate that, great. But our young children can't. So that's sometimes where it gets a little bit sticky with our younger children where they have some neurodivergence, not necessarily a diagnosis per se, but they're perceiving their world differently. So there may be some challenges that they're having like in a classroom setting or at home because of that. So trying to figure that out, and really you have to enter it with a mind of curiosity to find out like, what's going on here? How can we help support this child in the environment that they're in or change the environment to modify and accommodate for their needs? So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I
like that's all the way around, but it's a complicated question.
Exactly. Sure. And I like what you were saying about, because for me, that's what, when I was being explained and a part of my acceptance, because my son doesn't know he has autism. He's John.
Sure.
That's who he is. But as the parents, and I explaining that to my husband, I want them to know him first. He has autism.
Yeah.
And that Nan had dad. That was all our teachers were great. But I want to say she and probably Lou, that's a conversation we had about he has autism. And his neurologist, from that standpoint, it was a whole different, kind of what you were just saying, conversation. So I do appreciate that. And I do think a lot of individuals are, confused.
It can be confusing.
It is, but Paula said something really important when you said you built your tribe. And we all need that, right? We all, no matter whether your child does have autism or you have a typically developing child, we all need our tribe.
Exactly.
But your tribe may look differently than you expected, right? That's not the tribe you intended. I've always said that I'm I come from the education background too. I'm probably the person you never really wanted to have to work with. But I hope that I can bring some value to your life. I hope that I can help get you to where you need to be on your next step. And so building that tribe for families is really important. So I'm glad you touched on that.
Yes. So piggybacking on that, what are some early developmental signs of autism that parents and early childhood educators may notice?
So we're looking at autism, you're looking at 3 areas. Basically, you're looking at social communication, social interaction, and then you're looking to see are there some repetitive and restrictive behaviors. So some of the first signs that, and again, these are not necessarily, let me preface this, they're not necessarily.
You can tighten those.
I was about to say, this keeps falling. Oh, there you go. Okay, it keeps falling in my headphones. These are not necessarily just because your child is experiencing one or more of these signs that, oh my goodness, we need to go have an autism evaluation. It may be that you just need to be having a conversation with your pediatrician about let's do some developmental screening. So if your child is not babbling by the time they're 12 months old, if they're not show an interest in you, and you know how babies oftentimes want to show you something. I see this thing that's really interesting, and I want to hold it out and show you, and I want to see your reaction. That sort of back and forth, turn-taking, social interaction. If you're not seeing that with your child, or if you're really having to try to facilitate it, that's something that we would want to look a little more closely at. If your child is maybe using your hand as a tool, that's one thing we would see a lot in early intervention is, they love the toy that where you push the button, it makes a sound. sound, but they want to take your hand to push, use your hand to push the button on the toy. Things like that. If you're having a hard time getting them to respond to their name or just getting them to look at you and interact with you, that would be something that would kind of raise a little bit of a concern for us. And then also if you're not seeing them use gestures, and this is one thing I think parents often, I noticed when I worked in early intervention and we would do developmental assessments, parents were like, oh, you're right, they don't point. They're not pointing at things. And I hadn't thought about that before because sometimes we anticipate children's needs, but that should be something we see developmentally sort of happening because of imitation and modeling. And then for some of those restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior, this is where sometimes you'll see these children line toys up. They prefer to look at the wheels on the car and spin the wheels on the cars. Now, just because your child lines toys up doesn't mean that there's a developmental delay. A lot of children do that as a part of development. So, but when you're looking at these things are happening and you're seeing that across domains of development, when you're seeing a lot of either overreaction to sensory input, so this is a child that in a room that doesn't feel noisy to you, but they're putting their hands over their ears or they're putting their hands over their eyes or humming, they seem to be agitated, or maybe they're over responding to stimuli like looking straight into the lights or especially blinking lights or a ceiling fan. If they're looking, very physically active, kind of looking for that input, that could be that they're understimulated. And if that tends to interfere with like daily life, we all get those ways and get out of whack a little bit on our sensory systems, especially as young children. They're still learning to modulate that. But when you're really seeing that affect them throughout the day in all contexts, that's something to look at as well. So the good news is that, right now, the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend 18 and 24-month-old screenings for autism at those checkups as just a part of their ongoing development. So they should really be checking development each time you come in for a checkup, but specifically looking at autism at those two checkpoints. I know there are still a few pediatricians that may say, I've heard families say, well, they were telling us to kind of wait and see. And, parents can go online and do those screeners themselves now. I mean, it's so accessible. It's free. And there's support there waiting for you if you need it. So the earlier we can get that, we know those outcomes are going to be better.
Yeah. I have an acquaintance that I've known for a long time, and she has two autistic sons. And the older one, of course, was diagnosed first, and when her second son came along, he exhibited some of the same behaviors, and I know there was some concern with the pediatrician. Is he modeling what he sees, or is this, autism? Is that a common concern when you're talking about, multiple children in families?
I've heard families mention that, but we also know there's a genetic component to autism, so it's not it's not uncommon to see more than one, see a sibling also have a diagnosis of autism, and for those two diagnoses to look very different. One child may need a lot more support than another child.
Yeah, as they've grown up, they're definitely, different people, different humans, different places on the spectrum. So I was just wondering, how, because, children mimic what they see, they mirror what they see, and if that's, in siblings, does it cause like delay in diagnosis?
Yeah. No, you may see some mimicking that happens, but remember, when your child is developing, typically they'll move past that stage, and then they're going to continue on their trajectory of development. And if this is a child that is a sibling that also is in need of a diagnosis or in need of some screening and further evaluation, you're going to start seeing some of those signs. So there's a way to tease that out. It's not unusual, like I said. We're looking at those genetic components too, so it's not unusual to have more than one child necessarily in a family that has autism, but it doesn't mean again, like if that child is imitating, they're going to move past that phase and move on and continue to develop those skills that they're on track for developing.
And for our early childhood educators, what should they do if they see concerns, if they see things that cause them concerns?
Yeah, so there are some really good resources that I can give you for show notes.
This is your specialty. Yes, we'll definitely put those on the website.
I will say this. Well, first, going back to parents, trust your instincts. number one, parents, trust your instincts, because I have so many families that have said, oh, I noticed when they were babies, they didn't quite look at me, or they didn't really respond to their name, whatever. So trust those. But for childcare professionals, same thing. You know children. You have these children. And what really makes childcare professionals special is that they have a group of them. So they're comparing across the context of peers, and they can really usually identify. And what I've seen is that a lot of times they don't feel confident to have that conversation with a family, and they don't know how to bring that up. And, there's a relationship there that you don't want to sacrifice with a family. So understandable. One thing that I really, really love that's happening now that wasn't happening many years ago is a lot of child care facilities are doing developmental assessments as a part of their just what they do. Maybe at the beginning of the year or sometime during the year, they're doing developmental assessments with every child in their care. So you're not pinpointing a child to say, oh, here we see little Johnny
we're
here.
Only doing this because we see something.
We're going to target your child. We're doing this with every child. But what it gives the provider, the child care provider, is a place to start that's objective to say, this is what we're seeing compared to what we would expect to be seeing, right? And it's not that those things can't happen somewhere else. I know typically they're using like in ages and stages, right, which is fabulous. But you can access that in a lot of different places, right? Online, the pediatricians are using it. But for childcare, you know that child. And in that setting, you really know that child, right? You know them better than the physician does. You're spending more time with them day in and day out. But there are some really good resources on, I think it's Autism Speaks, and Autism Navigator, Baby Navigator is probably one of my favorite websites for this age group, because they actually have some little videos to help providers to have that conversation and kind of how to start it. We're definitely going to focus on strengths. Because these are kids who have some great, amazing strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like any child. So we want to start there and then talk about, okay, this is what we would expect to be seeing for this child's age. And then here we're having some concerns. And also remember, for parents too, those referrals to early intervention, Help Me Grow will do it over the phone assessment too, like a screener. But they can make those referrals. You don't necessarily have to go through the whole physician. Now, definitely there needs to be a conversation happening with your pediatrician.
Exactly.
But those referrals can come from the family. So a lot of times families are saying, well, I was waiting on the doctor. Don't wait on the doctor. Get it done. Right. It's free. It's easily to access. There's no reason not to do it.
And I for me, for the resource teacher, was the one suggested he needs a neurologist. And I was like, a neurologist? Why? Well, because we need to be able to look at it. We did all the screening, the MRI. Imagine a child with autism with an MRI and his mom.
I don't like going in that thing.
So, and then the report that comes from the neurologist, of course, which was, very interesting. And we had a really good neurologist, and he just retired. So it's been hard because he was with us. John was like almost 2.5. And he had been with us from day one, and his words was, well, he will probably never talk. So when it started to come, and he would say, if anybody would have ever told me, but you all did the right thing. You put the work in. You did your research. He would always ask us, so what is he doing? Well, blah, blah, blah. The speech therapy, the OT, the PT, and just having those individuals to say, and to allow Carrie to come into our home, his preschool teacher at UCP, and help us label, to go through the steps. It's work.
Yeah.
It's work, but having these resources and knowing the screening, and as a teacher, I was the one on the other side of the table now, because a developmental delay was probably the closest we had back in the early 90s that we could, talk to parents about. And then I guess came the autism, because you're not supposed to put labels, but I needed to know. And the neurologist was the one that would stay before the resource teachers. He has autism.
Yeah.
He's on the spectrum.
It's not about, I think a lot of people get really caught up in, I don't want to label this
Right,
child
right,
at an early
right.
age. It's not about the label.
Not at all.
It's about learning, how does this child learn? What do we need to help support them?
Strategies.
And then how do we build that
Exactly.
support around them and how they learn? And if you can do that early,
The earlier the better.
yeah, the better. Absolutely.
Because as a kindergarten teacher, I'm working with parents that are in denial and not getting the resources. Even something in my mind as simple as speech. No, I don't want him. Well, yes, speech is under special education, but so is gifted. So having parents to, and then when I realized, well, I got a story to tell too. And I would say, it's not the end of the world, because that's what someone had to say to me.
Yeah.
It is not the end of the world, Paula. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
He's going to be the best he can be, and he is.
Yeah.
We're all different. You just said it earlier. We all have something. But the earlier, the better. And then getting the right information, because there's so many misconceptions.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of that out there.
Yeah, it's
Be
just-
careful when you Google
Thank you.
or
Yeah.
WebMD
Yeah.
anything. It's
Absolutely.
not going to turn out well.
I know, even with my own experience, my daughter has several mental health diagnoses. And when I started the process of getting her 504 plan in place and things like that, I had to get some documentation. And I got the letter from, the psychiatrist, and it spelled out her diagnoses. And I sat there and cried.
Yeah.
I knew it. And I'd been in the process for a good 6-9 months, but something about seeing it in writing
It's true.
was really hard.
Yeah.
And I can't articulate why that is, but I can understand why parents, are hesitant. But the only thing I have a hard time identifying with is the not receiving help and not receiving the resources.
I agree.
Because I had been doing that and I had no issue. I'll see every doctor, line them up, give me, whatever kind of doctor it is, I'll do it all. But it is difficult. So I can identify with that.
And I think sometimes parents, I've ran into this situation where parents had not a great experience with their own school experience. And so it's created a bit of anxiety around school in general.
Right.
And so I have to often remind parents that we're working with that are especially new to a diagnosis, special education is not a place.
Right.
It's a service.
That's right.
The special education service follows the child. Wherever that child may happen to need to be receiving those services is a different conversation.
Right.
And so I think oftentimes I hear families go, oh, I remember that special education class down the hall in the back.
And that's
I was going to say
totally
that.
different now.
That is not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And parents have worked really hard, and professionals have worked really hard to advocate for those changes, and they're happening. So take advantage of these great services. There are so many children who probably in school systems right now have IEPs or 504 plans, and you would never know that because they're with their peers. They're receiving those supports however they need to be received. So they should be individualized. So some of that denial, I think, comes from that place of, I don't want to walk this road, or they've been in that system themselves.
Because parents would say, well, you're a teacher, you work for the school system. That still did not give me a golden paved walkway. What did it was I learned to be an advocate for my own child. And again, those individuals in my tribe, I trusted them. And even if they were behind I'm not calling any names, but even if they were behind the scenes saying, no, that's not right. This is what you need to do, because know your rights. And you have to know your rights as a parent and be an advocate for your child. Because not everyone understands, not everyone's going to put in the workload. I'm just blessed that we had teachers, we had those individuals. And when my son went to high school, I went to the principal at that high school and I said, look, I really need my son to come here because you have the best teachers. And we had a talk, and we talked about my son and met the teachers. Yeah, he can come.
Yeah, that's
You
great.
have to be an advocate.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can't go in all rah-rah. You've got to go in and have a
That's
conversation.
hard for some of us.
And it is. And especially when it comes to my child, because when you've tried to say what you can't do and this is what he needs, well, I take a deep breath, get my facts in order, get some data, and just go into, so how can this happen?
Right.
But you have to. It's a struggle, and the services for me, the older they get, that's where we're at now. You know what? There's not a lot of resources.
I think that's hard for parents who, because it is such a personal journey, and it's such a big part of your family and who you are, and it is tied to your emotions.
Yes.
So removing those emotions in certain situations is very difficult. But yeah, advocating is huge. Advocacy is huge.
I think that if you anyone who's ever attended one of our community education workshops or sessions, that is our overarching theme, because Michelle will retire one day. You know, like your professionals and your team may change.
Yes.
Those people may be in and out in seasons of your child's life. You are going to be the constant. And so anything that you can learn, and Paula's an excellent example of this. She just said everything I would have said.
She coached me through.
She's
through
so,
advocating
everybody
for my
needs
child,
to talk to Miss Paula over here. But that's it. You've got to figure out how to, we got to navigate those systems, and we've got to learn the systems so you can be a better advocate. And at the RAND, that's really probably one of our biggest, like I said, overarching themes that we have a family navigator that works with us who's a parent of a child with autism. And so she can help families navigate. But the goal is, don't depend on us. Right. Let us give you those resources, help you navigate through some of those challenges, but then you know where to pick up and go from there.
Because you all would do the IEP trainings. And even though we had a good resource teacher, Miss Karen Harrell at Theodore was the LEA, but going through that training and something the state sent out, and they were asking for parents to volunteer, and I was like, well, I'll do it. But to understand this IEP right here and transitioning before I got to high school to understand what was. And now when I ask people, or even during that, well, what are you talking about? No, transition plan. Your child.
Yeah. It's an intimidating process.
Yeah,
too.
it but to learn, and it just was not because I was a teacher, but I was being taught. You have to know this for your child. You keep all those IEP plans. You're going to need them. You keep I think you all did a training on how to keep this binder. And trust me, you will need all that.
Yeah, that's in my notes today.
Yeah,
actually.
I'm saying, I mean, you have to take time to do it, and you keep everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot kind of out of the structure of the conversation, which is what happens when you're having a good conversation.
That's great.
So, Michelle, you want to give us some of your highlights from your notes you made?
Are we moving on to our next? Where were we at?
Yeah, so
I got a lot of thoughts.
So, okay, let's just briefly hit the strategies that we want to talk about that work at home and in everyday life.
So one thing I really want to point out, early intervention, this is fairly new. It's happened in the last several years, but I say in this world, I guess it's new. Early intervention has endorsed some 5 strategies for birth. It started out as EI for birth to 3, and we're now, as a part of the Alabama Interagency Autism Coordinating Council, which is a big, long name for a group of professionals and parents and advocates who look at what does best practice in the state need to look like for autism. They've adopted these 5 naturalistic developmental behavioral intervention strategies that are evidence-based, but they can be used in any setting. So at home, in the community, at school, which is why I love them. And any teachers out there will be like, oh, we already do this. You do.
Right.
This is just good stuff. But how do we do that with a lens of looking at a child with autism? Because most often what we hear is behavior. It's the behavioral piece. So those 5 strategies, I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Caregiver implementation. We know that caregivers implementing the strategy is much more effective. They have a whole lot more time with that child than, say, a therapist. Therapists need to also still be involved, let me make that clear, and need to be used as a resource and to consult as well and to do some targeted interventions. But your caregiver's with that kid all the time. So how can we implement things within our natural routines of the day? So thinking about dressing and diapering and meal times and bath time and playtime and outside, all those things that you do, walk into the mailbox, right? Those are all learning activities. I know that you guys train on this. Right here.
Yeah.
Naturalistic teaching opportunities, following the child's lead, but how does following a child's lead for a child with autism who may not really be looking to interact with you. What does that look like? So that, to me, oftentimes, and I tell families this a lot, look at what your child is doing. If you're a teacher, look in the classroom at what that child is choosing to do. If they're taking a car and laying on the floor and rolling that car back and forth in front of their face over and over and over, take a car, lay down beside them, roll it back and forth, follow their lead, see what they do. Oftentimes you'll get their attention where it may be hard to just get their attention by calling their name or trying to get them involved in an activity. And then you build from that, right? You're connecting with them, you're building trust. And you're adding, words and language and describing what you're doing. Also modeling. We know that modeling for all children is how most children learn. Modeling for children with autism may need to look a little bit different. It may need to be a little more facilitated, and you may have to get more creative. But just, again, you're walking to the mailbox, Mom, and we do this every day. The mail comes every day, pretty much. We can go to the mailbox. We can let the child open. Okay, let's open, right? Let's give them a word. Let's model the behavior that we want to see from them. And we do that within predictable routines. So predictability is really big for our young children. For any young child, it's big, right? But for our children with autism who may be missing pieces because they're not necessarily focusing on all of that at one time, providing some of that structure that's predictable, helping them through some of those transitions, which I'll give you a couple of strategies for, is really helpful. And then also providing natural reinforcements. So when they're in their natural environment, in the classroom or at home, and one thing that I remember specifically, a child who really loved bubbles, and that's the thing, and I knew they loved bubbles, and so you blow a couple of bubbles and you just wait. And you wait for that. Sometimes it's just eye contact, right? It's not necessarily a word that you're going to get because they may not be verbal language users yet. So you get that eye contact. Oh, you want more bubbles. Bubbles. And we blow a few more bubbles. And then we try to start shaping that to work on, maybe more. Or maybe we work on the word bubbles, or we work on a gesture that they use, whatever that may be. And we do it consistently. But you also can do those same things across contexts. So whether they're at home or at school, it's a great way for school and home to work together. The activity is not as important as the strategy that you're using, right? The technique that you're using to help support that child, because you're also looking at how does that child learn? What are they interested in? Right. What motivates them? And that may look different than your typical peers. And so I've had a lot of families and child care providers who may get frustrated because the child really likes to carry a spoon around. They may really like to carry some unusual object around. That's sort of their security thing. Use that, right? If they love I don't know the characters. I don't have young children anymore, but whatever the character is, use it.
Was a tissue, Kleenex tissue.
There you go, yeah.
When he was 3, 4, 5, and they used to say, the tissue's not bothering him, it's bothering you. Yeah. Is it hurting? No. Yeah. So what's the problem? It was just, I just put the tissue down. Yeah. Pick your battles. So eventually he threw the tissue to the side. But
if he's interested in tissues, how could we use tissues to do all the things we're trying to teach him to do, right? So you have to get a little bit creative in that.
And be okay with whatever it is. It's just like now he likes putting things in the trash. Granted, he makes his own trash. But you do. That is so true. So true.
Yeah. And it's also thinking about the environment that they're in. So we know this with any classroom, any environment that we're in, right? In this room right here, it's a lovely room and it's not overstimulating.
Right.
But if you're in I've seen some classrooms that are beautiful and straight out of Pinterest, but you guys know, like if you've got 1,000 things hanging from the ceiling and on the wall and it's colorful and it's bright and it's so fun, that can be very visually overstimulating for a lot of children. So thinking about that, if this child is, we talk about that behavior piece that everybody that's usually what we're getting calls about. Yeah. We want to serve this child, but the behavior is just, this child's off the chain. We don't know how to help them, but we want to. So that's the message I hear from child care directors and providers is we need help, right? So as part of these 5 strategies, something that has come out of this is some new training. First, we have child care enhancement with a purpose right here in town, all over the state, with UCP Mobile, which they come in, work with the child care facility. They do excellent work. They provide that support. As a part of kind of extending that work, the 5 strategies that we talked about that were part of the Advancing Autism in Alabama initiative, that was originally created from the work of Dr. Angie Barber and Dr. Kimberly Tomany out of University of Alabama, and they worked with early intervention for that. But we've expanded that now to how can we now make this work for 3 to 5-year-olds. So I co-chair the Birth to 5, one of the work groups under our subcommittee with the AIACC of the state. And one thing we're looking at is how can we provide that support on a birth to 5 level, not just birth to 3, but also those 3 to 5 classrooms, wherever that child is, whether they are in the home, in a Head Start, in a community daycare, family home care, wherever they're at. These providers have access to that. And one of the really important pieces that comes with that, and there are some grants that are happening now, so some of this is very new, but it's gaining traction, and I'm so excited about this work because what they're going to do is provide not only training on how those 5 strategies look in your classroom or environment for a child with autism or suspected autism, maybe some characteristics of autism, but they don't have a diagnosis yet. And these work with typical children too. Like
exactly.
I said.
Right. That is so true. That's true.
But then another piece of that is it provides learning collaboratives and mentors, like community mentors that have been trained in all these strategies, the learning collaboratives that can, they can have some of that technical one-on-one consultation and support to problem solve with maybe this one child in your case. There's all this, we all go to training, right? And we're like, oh, this is great. I'm going to implement it tomorrow. And then you get there and it doesn't work. And now who do you call? So this kind of provides that ongoing support piece.
I'm going to put a little plug in. We've got a special training that we're doing at our summer conference, the Gulf Coast Early Childhood Summer Symposium. Somebody from elsewhere in the state that's doing that is coming to talk more about that. So
great. Well, I hope
we're excited.
I know Mary Beth Vick has been a part of that work, and
that's her.
Is excellent.
I didn't want to say her name.
Yeah, absolutely. Give her 100% credit. She's the biggest cheerleader for this, and she's actually works with me on our work group. So
we'd love for you guys to come too. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So anyway, really excited about that. So there's some things out there that have not, that are new and kind of happening, but also providing support so that children can stay in their whatever environment they need to be in, but also looking at what does that environment need to look like. So, I'm trying to see if I have any other notes that I did mention. I think those were all good things.
We're going to put those in the show notes.
Yeah.
So if you if there's online links and resources and
I'll
stuff,
send you some stuff.
We're going to have all that out there for you. So I think you covered what I was going to ask. I can't. I guess the last thing I want to ask is, when families receive a diagnosis or start asking questions, what kind of support does the Regional Autism Network provide?
Well, I think I'm most proud of one of our supports is our family navigators. And this is all over the state. So yes, we have one here, but across the state. So if you have people in other parts, they can access this. Our family navigators are parents with children with autism, for one. And so we tell providers who do the diagnostic piece, please let them leave with a RAN flyer.
Right.
Please let them know they can call us, because it can be, families will say, oftentimes when they call us, I don't even know where to start.
It feels isolating.
Yes. It feels isolating. It feels overwhelming, and it's learning a new language. And Paula, you've alluded to that. You had to learn a whole new language that you hadn't planned to learn. Again, you hadn't asked to be in this new community that you find yourself in. So a family navigator is somebody who's been there. They've been through that initial diagnosis. They can provide support in that way, but also very knowledgeable about the resources. So we are really tasked with knowing the resources for autism in our community, and each RAN has that wherever they are. But I can give you resources for if your child's having a hard time with a haircut, right? If they need, like we're talking about childcare or summer care programs, if they're needing things like a dentist that understands, how to work with a child with autism and takes your insurance, because that's the other piece.
That's a whole
different conversation.
We keep notes on.
That's another episode.
We try to see if there are new agencies or new providers that open up, services, that we're visiting them, that we're calling and chatting with them and just talking about what those are, so we can make sure families know what those are. So having that family navigator there, we also have a Hispanic community liaison that's Spanish speaking for our Spanish speaking families. They can call us, they can text us, they can email us, they can set up a time to come in and talk face to face.
You are accessible.
We are
Yes.
very accessible.
Yes.
So whatever works for them, because life is busy. We get it. And actually most of our families probably choose to text.
Yeah.
Because, life is hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can shoot a quick text off to get a resource you need that a phone call is too long for that. You don't have time for all that. So we get it. So that's one thing. And then I would say also, you talked about a binder, like we talked about binders.
Yes.
Tell me about this binder.
When families get a new diagnosis, one of the things because you're feeling out of control and you're feeling like it's a lot coming at you. There are a lot of professionals. And oftentimes families find themselves on one side of the table and all these professionals on the other side. And that's very intimidating. I went through that with both my daughters had verbal apraxia. And even being in this field, when I went to those IEPs, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot everything I knew. It's hard, but having that binder and get you a 3-ring binder, put you some dividers in it. Anything you get paperwork for, evaluations, therapy notes, IEPs, any form, any of those types of that information that may be helpful to then take to another provider, it's a lot easier if the parent takes it with them, right? Rather than having to do all the releases and everything. If you can just say, here's my copy, let me show you what I have. You cut out a lot of the time, but it also gives the parent a sense of control and agency and advocating for their child. So I would say that'd be the easiest thing to do from day one. You don't even know what you're putting in the binder yet, but when you get stuff, put it in there, right? And you can figure it out. I usually tell parents also keep some notebook paper in there so you can make a note of who you called and what you talked about. Because we get a lot of calls at the Regional Autism Network from people who think they've talked to us who haven't yet, and they've talked to us, and it takes me a while to figure out who they were talking to about what to get them redirected to, get them connected back where they need to be. And so, make notes of everything you might need to know. And it just gives that parent some, again, that beginning piece of advocacy. This is a very small thing, but very powerful when you walk into a room of professionals and you've got your binder with you and say, okay, I've got it all right here. And then what you have, I'm going to add to this. And so, here we go. Let's get started.
And it for me, it gave me, because I just felt like it's a lot. But I had to be prepared no matter who I was sitting down with. I'm just thankful for the fact that there were individuals who should have been across the table. They would come sit beside me. Yes. And that has just made a big difference. And I thank you all, because I think you all have been the consistent piece. Because different organizations and groups, focus changes, the focus will change, but that consistent for understanding, and even for to have the resource teachers, the LEAs to say, well, here's Rand, blah, blah, and just to let us know what was going on. I just think you have to have, I don't care who you are, there are no dumb questions. Because sometimes I feel like, well, can I ask this? No, you ask it. There are no dumb questions when it comes to your children. None whatsoever. So that has been, because in later years, pulling out that binder and that folder with all this stuff in it was something that,
and you can probably see how far you've come.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask both of you one final question before we sign off. If there's one thing that you wish more educators and parents understood about autism, what would it be?
Who's going first?
Draw straws.
I'll let Ms. Paula go.
For me, I just wish everyone would realize, for parents, it's not the end of the world. The earlier, the better. And children with autism, they're human beings. We all have quirks. We all have different things. And before you judge them, get to know them. Before you judge them, get to know them. And just love them. Love them and accept them. And understand, as parents, sometimes we do go from 0 to 100 because it's about our child. And just ask questions. Talk to me. If people look or stare, sometimes they don't have to. I tell them, well, he has autism. Yeah. Or, I just think we need to be a little bit more friendlier when it comes to people who are different. We all have differences.
Yeah, and along those same lines, I think understanding who that child is and how they experience the world instead of trying to change them is important for no matter what role you're in, whether you're a parent or a provider, a teacher, is looking at how's this child perceiving the world around them, and then how can we support them. And it's, again, not about the label. It's really about looking through a new lens. And it's, those are things that apply not just to people with autism at any age, but to everyone around you.
Exactly.
We're all very different, and we all perceive the world a bit differently. But sometimes I think we sometimes come to the table with preconceived notions.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, ladies, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
I feel like there's so many more in-depth pieces of this that we could talk about. But for now, for our Unrattled listeners, if you're listening on our podcast for parents, just remember to stay engaged with your kids. Nobody's got this thing figured out. And we thank you for being here. Make sure you check out the show notes for all of the resources. And if you have any questions, we will have on there how to get in touch with Michelle. She will answer everything.
Yes, she will.
I'll do my best.
And Michelle, should we plug April Autism Awareness
Yes.
Month? Yes.
April is World Autism Month.
And this will likely be airing during World Autism Month. So thank you, Paula, for reminding me of that.
Yes, our favorite. We support it all year long, but just to be able to...
It's a good way to bring awareness.
It is.
And to highlight. So, okay. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tiny Talks on Early Learning is a production of Gulf Regional Early Childhood Services with support by PNC Grow Up Great. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content provided in this podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional advice or guidance, particularly in matters related to child development, education, or health. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on the Tiny Talks for Early Learning podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Gulf Regional Early Childhood Services or any organization they may be affiliated with. Lastly, please remember to always prioritize the safety, well-being, and best interests of your child in all educational and developmental endeavors.